Our guest today, Yogi Amrit Desai, really one of the original yoga people in the United States. He came here in 1960. And Phil, I'm glad you pointed out when I saw his picture, and I think what is he, 84, 80 something. He looks
Yeah,
terrific, unless it
I
was,
know.
photoshopped, and I don't think it was. And I've
No,
noticed that Iyengar looked terrific when he was 90. So I think a lot of the people that are very committed to yoga, yogic postures, asanas, tend to look better and later in life. Whereas some of the people I know that have been doing a lot of meditation without the yoga asanas, inwardly they may look very good, but outwardly they don't always look like they took good care of themselves. Would you
yeah,
agree? I mean,
I it seems that way. Yeah, but I mean, there's always exceptions. Like, I'm working on this biography of Yogananda. He did different kind of yoga, physical yoga, the kind of exercises he actually created, but they were yoga like
they're
and
called
asana like.
energization.
Yes,
There's a lot of
and
squeezing of the hands and tightening of the
mhm,
muscles and loosening it. I've seen it demonstrated. It looked, and I'd done a little bit of it, and
yeah.
it was very relaxing, but different
But
than.
he looked very good, toward the end. I mean, he had some illnesses toward
Hmm.
the end, but he looked very fit and sturdy.
Hmm.
At the same time, he died at 59. So,
Right.
stuff is, we all have bodies, we all have karma. And but yeah, I mean, people who take care of their bodies tend to look better when
Hmm.
they get older. So for sure.
Now he preceded Swami Satchidananda, did he not?
He came here earlier, but he didn't start teaching yoga right away. So, in a certain way, they were contemporaries around the same time, give or take a year or two.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. And the other thing that's interesting, and it always comes up no matter who we interview from the world of Eastern spirituality, their guru, their teacher, their lineage always is the one that really has it. Everyone else is slightly off, obviously that's the belief that people have, and my feeling is more they probably all have something similar, and it's
Yeah,
usually very, very good, and but generally their group is going to have the easier path or the more profound path. Or it's same thing. It happens in religions. It happens in spirituality, and I think now, as, especially a lot of the folks we've talked to that represent contemporary spirituality, that there's a blurring of the lines between one spiritual group and another, and there's more, kind of a universal approach of view. But that's there, whether it's mindfulness, meditation, or different yoga schools or whatever like that. There's always a feeling that we've got it slightly better.
yeah, you hear that sometimes, but you know, he, to be fair, his critique of contemporary hatha yoga with the loss in many instances of the spiritual or deeper dimensions of yoga
Right,
is accurate. But it's also true that there's many schools of yoga, many lineages
right.
that, like him, like Amrit Desai, have maintained the spiritual dimension. I know, the people at Integral Yoga of Swami Satchidananda, the people of Shivananda Yoga of Swami Vishnu Devananda, and many others would take exception to,
Right,
because they
right,
they too
right,
have kept the spiritual dimension of yoga alive, each in its own way.
right, right. I really liked the answer he gave to my question about does it bother you that yoga has gotten so secularized and so popular, and people do it to look good on the beach or for whatever other reason. His answer was it did not bother him because he didn't think it was yoga.
Right, right,
And then
right.
and then you brought up Phil, you brought up something I want to follow up with you when you were talking to him, and you mentioned to him that in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, or actually any of the Vedic literature that I'm familiar with, I've never seen or there's not really talk of yogic postures, asanas, and I've heard different things. I mean, some people say it came about, 400 or 500 years ago when the British were there, and whatever,
Uh,
whatever. But is
the,
it what are your thoughts on that? Is
I'm
yoga?
not enough of a scholar of Indian history to know the answer. All I can tell you is that people differ on how to date the history of what we think of as modern hatha yoga, because there's certainly evidence that there were asana postures centuries and centuries
Hmm.
ago. And if you think of yoga in its deepest, broadest sense of union and remove just the consideration of asanas, then it's as old as India,
Hmm.
practically, with yoga being mentioned in the ancient texts and in the Gita and the
Right,
Upanishads
right.
and so forth. So, in that sense, yoga is ancient. The kind of asana sequences and postures that are being practiced now in most yoga studios, some people say, were a blend of some ancient or centuries old practices, and later developments in hatha yoga, and then the addition of sort of some principles and practices that were taken from European uh, calisthenics and
Hmm.
gymnastics and military sort of training. And so some people would contend that what we see in yoga studios now is some kind of hybrid blend of different influences. But there's lineages. The point you were making, though, and that I made to him, is that in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which he uh, talked about with great reverence as a source, um, there's no mention of asanas as we know them. Asanas just described as proper posture for meditation. And but there are other texts like the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and others where asanas are not only mentioned but described and instructions are given, and some of those texts are centuries old. So it's
It's
complicated.
yeah, it's interesting in the West, in the United States. If you mention yoga to someone, 98% of the people will just assume you're referring to yoga asanas, not actually what the word yoga means. And so I think that a lot of these teachers, like Amrit Desai, are trying to get that point across that yoga
Yeah,
is much more than just those physical positions. Those physical
yeah,
positions exist to get you to that state of yoga, but it'll take a long time before yoga in America anyway, and in the West, is not completely associated with those various positions. And nobody
sure.
refers to meditation as yoga, but in fact, it's a
I
path to
know,
yoga.
I know, and
How did
it
that
is a
happen?
shame.
It's in
I
your
don't
book,
know.
yeah, yeah.
Branding, the media, there's probably a lot of factors.
Hmm.
Something gets popular and named and branded, and so you see, yoga being mentioned or labeled um, separately from meditation. And I'm guilty of it myself.
Right,
In my writing, I've done it just because people understand it
right,
better. But the truth is, nothing could be more yoga than a deep meditation
right,
practice.
right.
It's the very definition of yoga. But modern language and sort of whatever happened historically, yoga's come to be synonymous with physical practices of asana, and that's a shame. But I think more and more people understand that, and maybe the language will change to reflect it. I know that in certain circles, the the training of yoga teachers, um, there's some yoga teachers that essentially only teach asanas. All they really know how to do,
Mm-hmm.
and they can do it well. And But they don't go into the deeper aspects of yoga. They don't teach meditation practices. And so some people are advocating that those people shouldn't be called yoga teachers. They should be called asana teachers.
Yeah, that'll never
Maybe
happen
that,
because
no,
nobody ever
probably
says,
not.
"Hey, I'm going to the asana class." They'll always say,
Well,
"I'm
yeah,
going to the yoga class," and I don't have an asana mat; I have a yoga mat. And
right. Exactly.
it's really been. You're right. It's been branded, and yeah,
Whereas,
and I would say for people listening that maybe have never done meditation or asanas or whatever, a yoga asana class. Uh, if find a good teacher, a well trained teacher, and if you take that class and don't strain yourself and follow the instructions of a good teacher, then you're going to come out of that class feeling really, really good. That's
yeah.
always been my experience.
And I think some of the older people who got into these teachings from the meditation side,
Mm-hmm.
like you and I did, and people
Right,
who were with some of the other earlier gurus, they don't say I'm going to do yoga. They say I'm going to do asanas.
right. Yeah, that's right. When we used to give meditate TM courses and residence courses, retreats, we would say, yeah, there was an asana demonstration, not a
Right.
yoga demonstration. But I think if you said asana demonstration to many people, you would have to explain it to them.
Yeah, I know. Well, things change, but the main thing is not the language and all that, but
Yeah,
whether people are getting everything yoga has to offer. And so, in that respect, I was very glad we got into some of that
yeah.
with Amrit Desai, um, and I never knew that much about his methods. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
wrote about him, and I mentioned his meditation and motion in
Mm-hmm.
American Beta. But I had never taken any classes with the people he's trained or anything like that. So it was interesting to learn more about it.
Right. No, as I mentioned in the beginning, he's truly one of the pioneers. He's been there since the beginning, and to his credit, there are probably thousands upon thousands of people worldwide who feel healthier and better and more inwardly developed because of his teaching and what he's done. So,
Yeah.
good for him, and he continues it, and like we were saying in the beginning, he's probably in his mid 80s now, and he doesn't look like he's slowing down at all.
No,
So,
and it's a pretty remarkable story, because we didn't go into this in the interview, but he had a very thriving yoga community and loyal disciples and teachers he trained at his Kripalu
hmm
Institute
hmm
in Western Massachusetts. And then there was a huge upheaval in the 90s, and people can get the history of that online. And as a result of the break he had with the organization he founded,
hmm
Kripalu went on and became a more sort of secular place in the sense of not being guru centered, but more of an educational
hmm
institute. And it's probably the leading yoga retreat center in the country now. And he himself, he continued to teach, and now he has a thriving ashram and teacher training programs and workshops in Florida. So it's just an interesting historical story how he and his disciples at that time went their separate ways for very good reason. It was a huge upheaval and very
hmm
emotionally upsetting, and they both ended up thriving.
Interesting. So, I think we'll yoga will be around. I don't think it's a fad that's going to come and go.
No.
It's enormous. It's all encompassing, and yoga asanas I'm talking about now, and perhaps the next wave will be people having a deeper understanding and relating to the deeper meanings and purposes of yoga. And I think it's all good. I think it's
Yeah,
all
I'm
movement in the
sure
right
that'll be
direction.
that's happening.
All right. Well, Phil,
Okay, man.
until next time, and good luck finishing up your book on
Yeah, right.
Paramahansa Yogananda. We are in 2017, and sometime within the next 12 months or something like that, the book will come out. And
Yeah,
so we're all looking
keep
forward
up the
to
pressure, Dennis.
it.
Keep the
We have
pressure
a lot of
on.
people listening to this now. So,
Okay.
all right, next time.
See you
Over
later.
now.